Imagine a biological power plant, just swimming in the ocean, capable of generating enough electricity to power serious household hardware.
Right, which is wild to even picture.
Totally. And doing it with zero blueprints, zero engineering degrees, and absolutely no history of trial and error. So welcome in, everyone. Today we are exploring a really fascinating piece of source material.
Yeah, it's an excerpt titled 31, Animals' Instincts Dash the Revelation of the Wisdom of the Greatest Creator.
And the mission for this deep dive is to thoroughly map out the philosophical and, I guess, theological architecture of this specific text.
Exactly. We're examining an author who looks at the exact same natural wonders that biologists study every day, but, they construct an argument that entirely rejects the conventional scientific explanation of how those wonders actually came to be.
It's a piece of writing that really forces you to examine your foundational assumptions about intelligence and, well, the origins of complex life.
For sure. But before we really get into the weeds of this argument, we probably should clarify our approach here.
Yes, definitely. I need to state something very clearly for you, the listener, because this text touches heavily on religious and explicitly anti-evolutionary viewpoints. Our deep dive today will remain entirely impartial.
Right. Our goal here isn't to endorse this viewpoint, and we aren't here to debate it or debunk it either.
Exactly. We are essentially acting as your tour guides through this specific philosophical landscape. We want to break down exactly what the author is arguing and how they construct their case so you can fully understand the perspective presented in the source material.
Because we really are just analyzing the mechanics of the argument here. To understand the author's ultimate conclusion about a creator, we first have to examine the foundation they build that argument upon.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the author doesn't just make a sweeping theological claim out of thin air.
No, they bring an extensive catalog of receipts.
They really do. The text presents this incredibly vivid list of natural marvels to establish just how sophisticated these behaviors actually are. They start by pointing out the American eel, noting it can discharge electricity of up to 880 volts.
Which is just a massive amount of power.
Right. This aquatic creature is swimming around, capable of generating a massive voltage purely through its own physiological mechanisms.
Yeah.
It's basically acting as an organic battery.
And the author strategically stacks these examples, to create this sense of overwhelming, highly specialized complexity.
Yeah.
Moving from the deep waters to terrestrial insects, the text brings up termites. These insects do not merely build mounds, they construct intricate nests that are explicitly described in the text as air-conditioned.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they are managing thermodynamics and regulating internal ventilation within a complex structure.
I love that example. It's as if the animal kingdom is fully staffed with master electricians, HVAC specialists, and architects. Take the African weaver bird, which I found to be a brilliant inclusion in the text. According to the author, this bird doesn't just pile sticks together. It specifically selects soft, flexible twigs and grass to weave an actual apartment.
An apartment that has some crazy specifications, right?
Yeah. The text notes two highly engineered parameters for this structure. First, it is completely waterproof, keeping rain from leaking in. And second, it's designed to hold snakes at bay.
Wow.
So it is a shelter and a specialized defense mechanism combined into one cohesive design.
What's fascinating here is how the text deliberately groups all of these highly diverse phenomena under one single massive umbrella.
Instinct.
Right, instinct.
Yeah.
The author takes complex, multi-step actions like the weaver bird's architectural sequence and places them in the exact same category as purely physical adaptations.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. For instance, the text highlights chameleons changing the colors of their body at will, or mollusks like snails growing tough, calcified shells for protection.
That categorization is a massive philosophical move.
Yeah.
Weaving a waterproof nest requires a behavioral sequence, whereas a snail having a shell is just a biological trait.
Exactly.
By putting them in the same bucket, the author is framing instinct not as a psychological urge, but as an embedded physical reality.
Yeah, and the text just continues this pattern, mentioning turtles knowing to incubate their eggs in warm sand, or bats utilizing sophisticated sonar in pitch darkness.
Oh, and the fireflies manufacturing cold light through bioluminescence.
Yes. And dragonflies executing aeronautic marvels, like hovering perfectly in midair or rising vertically.
It's just a relentless list.
It is. And the scope even stretches into cellular biology and collective swarm intelligence. Like, the author points to worms capable of physical regeneration when cut,
Ugh, yeah, the regenerative worms.
and military ants executing highly organized, well-planned collective activities. By bombarding the reader with this list, the author accomplishes a very specific rhetorical goal.
They are setting up these awe-inspiring examples as a deliberate, stark contrast to the idea of learned intelligence.
Precisely.
So if we accept this premise that these animals are performing master-level engineering and complex coordination, the obvious next question is, where do they get their degrees?
Right. How did they acquire this knowledge?
Because if you or I want to build a waterproof structure, it requires high-level cognition. We study structural integrity, we test materials, we make mistakes, and, we learn from them.
But the author makes a very aggressive pivot here regarding these animals. The text explicitly states that roosters crowing, bees building those mathematically perfect hexagonal honeycombs, chicks breaking out of their eggshell.
And migratory birds navigating the globe.
Right. They aren't doing these things because they possess great wisdom.
Which is wild to think about.
The author is systematically stripping the animals of any intellectual agency. The text insists that these creatures are not good at learning and summarizing experiences.
So a bee does not hold a postmortem analysis on a flawed honeycomb, figure out the structural weaknesses, and then summarize that experience to build a better one next season.
Exactly. The knowledge precedes the action entirely.
I mean, I'm struggling to wrap my head around the scale of this claim. Wait, so the text is arguing against any historical trial and error. It's essentially claiming that nature never had a version 1.0 with bugs that needed fixing over millions of years.
Yes, that is exactly the point. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the text is arguing for instant, perfect endowment. The author is fundamentally rejecting the Darwinian model of gradual adaptation.
So no slow buildup over time.
None at all. The text states unequivocally that these embodiments of animal instinct are not results of millions of years of evolution.
Wow.
This total dismissal of gradual learning is the absolute crux of the argument.
Okay, if you're a science buff listening to this, you're probably screaming at your dashboard right now about natural selection and genetic mutation.
Yeah.
But stick with us, because understanding this author's logic requires us to, well, put that aside for a moment.
Yeah, you have to step into their framework.
Right. The author's underlying logic here seems to rely on the concept of irreducible complexity, even if they don't use that exact term. Like, a half-evolved waterproof nest is just a leaky nest, which means the chicks die.
A half-evolved eggshell-breaking instinct means the chick suffocates.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Therefore, the author concludes it had to be perfect on day one.
And by arguing for this instant, perfect endowment, the author creates a deliberate vacuum. The text states that these instincts have existed from the very moment these animals appeared on Earth.
They hit the ground running.
Right, the behaviors were fully functional from the starting line. But by removing the slow, iterative crawl of evolution, and by removing the cognitive ability of the animal to figure things out for themselves, you are left with a massive, gaping how.
Seriously. How does the homing pigeon know exactly where to go? How does the American eel generate 880 volts on its very first day of existence?
You can't just leave a question of that magnitude hanging.
Nature abhors a vacuum, and so does a philosophical argument. Since it's not evolution, and it's not the animal being an unrecognized genius, the author fills that vacuum. They state that these instincts are the direct revelation of the wisdom of what they call the greatest creator.
So the text introduces a theological absolute to answer the biological mystery they've constructed. And to ensure this concept really lands, the author relies on a highly specific mechanical analogy.
Oh, the airplane analogy.
Yes. They argue that attributing these complex instincts to the wisdom and talents of the animals themselves, without looking for the creator behind them, is a fundamental error in logic.
The author uses this analogy here that I thought was honestly brilliant for clarifying their exact perspective. They compare looking at animal instinct to looking up, seeing an airplane flying in the sky, and marveling at the wisdom and cleverness of the airplane itself.
Which sounds absurd when you put it like that.
Totally. Imagine standing on the tarmac, watching a massive 747 take off and saying, wow, that aluminum tube is incredibly smart. It's figured out the physics of aerodynamics and thrust all on its own. It has so much talent.
Right.
The author says, doing that means you are entirely neglecting the wisdom, the engineering, and the talents of the plane's manufacturer.
It is a striking analogy because it leans on our inherent understanding of manufactured objects. Like when we see a complex machine executing a specific function, we intuitively know the machine didn't build itself.
Right, of course.
We also know the machine doesn't actually comprehend its own function. The 747 doesn't understand lift. It is simply designed to achieve it.
Let's bring that into the modern era to really unpack the mechanism of this idea. It's like looking at a smartphone that can translate languages in real time.
Oh, that's a good comparison.
Thanks. Yeah, and if you compliment the physical glass and silicon of your phone for being a linguistic genius, you are missing the point. The phone doesn't know it's translating French to English. It has no concept of language.
It's just hardware.
Exactly. It is hardware running pre-installed software designed by unseen engineers.
And by applying this mechanical framework to biological life, the author profoundly redefines the entire animal kingdom. In this worldview, animals are no longer viewed as independent biological agents shaping their own destiny through adaptation and environmental pressure.
They aren't the authors of their own survival.
No, instead they are viewed as perfectly manufactured vessels.
Vessels that are just executing brilliant pre-installed programming.
Precisely that. When the military dog detects a faint chemical set with extreme olfaction, or the spider weaves a geometrically perfect web, they are acting exactly as the airplane in the sky.
They are the physical hardware.
Demonstrating the unseen genius of the manufacturer, the greatest creator. Their instincts are not a reflection of their own evolutionary triumph over millions of years. They are a direct, unadulterated revelation of the creator's wisdom, working flawlessly as designed.
It completely shifts where the credit is due. And it honestly changes how you might interact with any nature documentary.
Oh, completely.
If you adopt the author's premise, watching a predator-prey dynamic or a complex mating ritual isn't a showcase of survival of the fittest. It is a perfectly ordered exhibition of a divine portfolio.
Right.
The chameleon changing colors isn't a neat trick of pigment cells adapting over epochs to hide from predators. It is a feature that was intentionally designed and coded into the chameleon from the exact moment it was placed on the Earth.
Because this perspective demands a top-down view of the universe rather than a bottom-up view. In the evolutionary model, the bottom-up view complexity arises organically from simple, single-celled beginnings through natural forces over deep time.
Trial and error.
Right. But in the top-down view presented by this text, the maximum level of complexity, the total wisdom of the greatest creator, exists first. That wisdom is then imparted downwards into the natural world in its final, perfected form.
That perfectly explains the rhetorical strategy of the first half of the text. I mean, why list so many specific, highly technical examples?
You overwhelm the reader.
Yes, the author is trying to overwhelm the reader with so much undeniable specialized complexity, from the thermodynamics of the termite mound to the collective military precision of ants, that the bottom-up evolutionary explanation starts to feel, in the author's view, entirely insufficient to explain the sheer volume of the marvels.
The complexity is meant to point directly and undeniably to a master engineer.
Right.
And it is vital to recognize how this framework treats the concept of instinct itself. You know, in modern biology, instinct is often viewed as a hardwired behavioral pattern, but one that absolutely has an evolutionary origin story.
A long history of genetic survival.
Exactly. But the author of this text strips away that origin story entirely. Instinct becomes synonymous with divine programming. It is unearned, untaught, and unevolved.
It really is a fascinating, rigid lens through which to view biology, regardless of whether you agree with the underlying premise or not.
Yeah.
It takes the messy, chaotic, often brutal reality of nature, wipes away the struggle of survival, and repackages it as an immaculate, perfectly ordered machine.
It definitely does.
It challenges you to really interrogate where you believe complexity comes from. When you look at a system that functions perfectly, like a homing pigeon finding its way back across hundreds of miles,
Right?
do you assume a long, blind process of historical refinement, or do you assume a mastermind?
It forces a decision on the origins of biological order.
I think that perfectly captures the journey we've been on today. We've mapped out a text that asks you to look at a spider weaving a web between two branches and challenges you to ask who exactly deserves the credit for that brilliance.
Yeah.
Is it the animal itself? Is it the slow, methodical march of millions of years of evolution? Or, as this author passionately argues, is it the unseen manufacturer of the airplane?
It is a profound philosophical challenge. And as we wrap up our analysis of this source material, I actually want to leave you with one final lingering thought to consider on your own.
Okay. I'm ready.
If we follow the logical architecture of this text, that all natural instincts are perfectly pre-installed programming by a creator from the very moment a species appears, how does that framework apply to human instincts?
Oh, wow.
Right. If our own base instincts, our innate drives, our survival behaviors are also just the software of a manufacturer, what does that mean for our concepts of human free will and personal responsibility?
Man. Now, that is a question that will absolutely keep you up at night.
Right.
If the software is pre-installed, are we just highly advanced airplanes flying a pre-programmed route, or are we actually the pilots in the cockpit? Next time you look out the window and see a bird selecting twigs to build a nest, remember that you are looking at a masterclass in engineering that happened without a single blueprint. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it gave you a new perspective to ponder. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and we'll catch you on the next one.